lots of fun stuff. So start leaving your questions and we'll get to as many as we can. As usual, check out our website, OurTism.com. I've got some great blogs up there. Hopefully getting some new ones out soon. And we have an event coming up next week where I'm going to do a workshop in Florida. So if you're going to be in Florida, go get tickets. We're going to talk about, me, Danny Rady, and Lillian Carrier are going to talk about what we wish our parents did differently. It's going to be a cool parenting workshop on how to parent someone with autism. So go check that out. And everything on the website, Life Map. We have a support group tomorrow for adults on the spectrum, so go RSVP for that. And yeah, I think that's all our events right now. Come back next week. I don't have a guest scheduled, but I think it's going to be Danny Rady. So come back next week. I do these talks every week at 7 Pacific Standard Time. So check it out. This week I'm here with Nima, and I have his website linked in the description. So go check that out when you finish the live stream. Hi, so Nima, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Chloe. My name's Nima, and I grew up in farm country, Michigan. I live in New York now, and I've lived for the majority of my life with a condition called hyperthymesia, where, interestingly, the mechanism through which my memory's ability to forget is broken, in a way. So it presents kind of very subtle challenges in my life, but also like a lot of great opportunities. So I didn't, at one point, I never thought my story was very, I always thought my story was very different, but then you realize when you start sharing it, you start learning more about yourself than you ever thought to ask yourself in the first place, because people are asking you questions that you never thought to ask yourself. So that's kind of what brings me full circle.
Yeah. Yeah, because we connected over, our stories were so similar because I shared my story at Nexus Summit, and you were like, "Oh my God, it's like
Washington D.C."
Yeah, and so that was really cool. I found that with a lot of different people with their different diagnoses are able to connect more than we're not over just experiences we've been through with different things. That like feeling of not fitting in and then figuring it out and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a very universal story. So yeah, I found the same thing when I started sharing my story. I thought, well, at first I thought everyone experienced the world the way I did, but just were able to cope better. And then when I realized that I was autistic, I was like, well, I guess I went the opposite direction and went, wow, I guess nobody experiences what I'm experiencing. But then as I started to talk about it more and more people were like, no, I experienced the same thing. And thank you for sharing that. You put things into words I wasn't able to. And so it's been a really cool journey doing
and communicating that. You're totally right. And communicating is a two-way street, right? It reinforces itself. The more you share, you find it's easier to share, right? And it's really just about creating the conversation and maintaining the conversation is what really I've found to be one of the most grounding habits to develop. And to engage in an honest moment, to be present, and to try to process something from someone else's perspective. And interestingly enough, and you hit it right in the nail, is that you're always told to treat others as have others treat you. And the funny thing is, in some of these contexts, is that you don't necessarily know where, or sometimes maybe someone wants to be treated differently, right? And understanding the nuances of these types of engagements is always a common challenge in all types of communication. But once you start practicing it, and once you're sharing courageously, as you do, then it becomes easier and it becomes more plentiful, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I do these talks is I want to share stories like yours that are unique so that people don't judge when they see someone going through something that they wouldn't necessarily be able to relate to. You know, it's important that we get exposed to more stories of people going through different things so that we treat each other kinder.
Absolutely. And that's, I think this is one of our, and you brought up Nexus when we were in Washington, D.C., we're at the U.S. Institute for Peace. And that was a wonderful, wonderful week. One of the important things you brought up is that it's one of the things we bonded on in that particular conference we discussed was the shared experience of the difficulty of going through diagnosis, right? Because at first it doesn't feel like there's anything wrong, right? There's no temperature gauge, and it's just, it feels like a disconnected communication. And then slowly you start to wonder, like, is it me? Is it how I'm perceiving things? And just being able to have a name, right, or have some sort of fixed point through which you can understand the unique lens that you've been given it's a huge benefit. But until you reach that point, right, until like you go from a couple of doctors to another couple of doctors, it can be a tough process. And that's one of the things that we really bonded on, was the fact that despite our very different types of perspectives and challenges, the common thing we shared is the challenges of going through the diagnosis process, even before you get to understanding treatment or how to, adapt in a lot of ways before you're given that opportunity. If that makes any sense, I say.
So I know everyone's going to be really interested in your diagnosis. And it's pretty rare, right? There's like only 50 people so far that we know have it. And so would you like to explain a little bit of your experience with that? What some of the challenges and what life can be like?
Of course. Well, I mean, one of the things, I didn't start talking publicly about this until a couple years ago, but for the last 18 years, I've been affected by a condition called hyperthymesia, which means I remember every day of my life like it's film, full sensory experience. And it's just a lot of information. And in reality, 99% of what you absorb or even learn in life isn't useful for survival. Forgetting is actually an evolutionary advantage in a way. So going through that process of trying to understand what I was going through, and at the same time, the first scientific studies about hyperthymesia weren't even published until 2005. There wasn't a name for what I experienced until 4 or 5 years after I started experiencing it. So that was very challenging, trying to talk to doctors who didn't hear about it, or, I mean, why would they? Because it wasn't part of the diagnosis book or the DSM-5 or DSM-4 at that point. And that was one of the big challenges, was how do you that doesn't necessarily have a name. Insurance companies don't understand, that therapists don't understand themselves, and going through that process and those challenges of communicating how you feel and what you're experiencing without being deterred is something that was a huge part of my experience, and something I'm really proud of, that I learned a lot from. And when I met you in Nexus, it was part of I saw that same positive essence in your experience as well, Chloe. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and what I talk a lot about, like, trying to stay in the moment, especially for parents, because like I'll be talking with my parent about like something I'm like excited about, and they'll like move on to like, oh, did you do your laundry, or like they're thinking about a million things a minute. And so I'm sure for your experience, trying to stay in the moment can be difficult with all your memories, like and one of the things I talk about that I learned from Danny Rady, the term being with it, where if you're experiencing an overwhelming emotion, or you stay in that moment, and it'll pass quicker than if you resist it. And so I know how easily it is to slip into like my mind or a fantasy realm and to try and escape that moment. So I can't imagine like having these like wonderful memories or awful memories or whatever to like go into to avoid reality. It's probably so easy for you to do instead of staying where you are. So
And you're 100% right. It's a dangerous trade-off, right? You like have to,
yeah.
is you're given a lot of power, you like have to be responsible to not abuse it, right? So it's not a but
Oh, your sound cut out. I don't know if that was me.
am I back?
Oh yeah, you're back.
Excellent. So my yeah, my experience, I just lost my train of thought. So the experience that I had is it's people always it's hard. Actually, this is one of those funny things when people like put themselves in your shoes, right? So but they would never, even when they think they're doing something positive and their intentions are always positive. But sometimes it's funny how that can kind of flip, right? So
Yeah.
my I used to one of my claims to fame is I was a citywide karaoke champion, my team, and back in Washington D.C. were really fantastic, wonderful people, and amazing voices and big hearts, and they and I would do karaoke, but I didn't start talking publicly about my hyperthymesia until maybe a few seasons of karaoke in, and then when people found out, they're like, "Oh, Nima, like, I heard about this memory thing you do. Like, I bet that must help a lot with karaoke." And I'm like, yeah, it does actually. And they're like, and they put themselves in my perspective, like, yeah, if I had a memory like that, I would just find the songs that people kept winning with, and I would just reuse them. And I'm like, no, like when you remember things, right? What you want to do actually is you want to find something that no one's ever done and you've never seen before. So not only excites you, but you get to share something beautiful, new with the world, right? The problem is when people put themselves in your shoes, they assume that you would do what they would do, which isn't necessarily true, right? So, I mean, the intentions were sweet, and I know they meant well, but it's like, no, man, I would definitely, I'd use it for a positive thing, right? So that's also a challenge too. It's like, it's really hard. Sometimes even something as noble as putting yourself in someone's shoes has its own nuances that need to be accounted for. So,
yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that a lot where with autism, we talk about it as like a different way of processing the world. So we think so differently from that of a neurotypical. So I've seen so many parents put labels on their kid as like lazy or manipulative because they don't understand the reaction that's happening. Where because our vocabulary will be so different too. Well, I'll say, you know what, I'm too tired today to do something. And their definition of tired is, you know, I'm a little bit sleepy. And my definition of tired is I'm having a sensory overload and in pain. And, you know, so, and they're like, well, then you're just lazy,
both are numbing.
You know?
Both are numbing.
So instead of going, well, what do you mean by that? You know, and like trying to connect and understand what's actually going on, why the kid doesn't want to go to school, or, you know, why they're having such a hard time. There's then this like anger that builds up, like, you know, like, well, why don't you just do it? Why don't you know, like that kind of thing. And so I've seen that a lot, and I've definitely dealt with that with my parents and with different people at different times in my life, because it's hard to connect with someone that's so different and experiences the world so differently. But there's also like these beautiful moments when we do connect, and they're like, wow, I've never been able to experience something like that. That's really beautiful that you do. So I can see that where people really like to put yourself in your shoes and go, you know what, I would never do it that way.
People don't get it, right? There's a whole nother thing, right? And it's it's one of those great ironies of life, right? So I agree with you. And there's an amazing book actually I just finished. I recommend it to everyone. It's called, I think it's Ego is the Enemy, by Ryan Holiday. And you hear a lot of colloquial definitions about ego, but it's really one of the most amazing books. It has an awesome series of historical cases that it goes through. Very fascinating. And but the coolest thing is there's a real understanding for what ego really means. Not even in the Freudian sense, but in the sense of like, the ego is kind of this blind spot, and the size of it is very much a reflection of the difference in how we perceive reality and what reality actually is. And if we can close that gap as much as possible by being mindful and measuring ourselves and always trying to keep track, right? It doesn't matter, what your diagnosis is or not, or if you're, wherever you fall and everyone gains an advantage in themselves by understanding themselves, know thyself, by measuring themselves. And that's the one thing to me kind of keep on track. And it's something that universally I've noticed helps everyone, because that sense of awareness and that sense of regularity and that sense of habit can really positively reinforce. It's festive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I do feel like it's important to know yourself, because that's the only way you can improve. It's like, your faults, and like what you want to work on. And the only way you know that is if you know yourself. And I've known people who worked on things that they thought they needed to work on for a very long time, and then went, wait, this isn't actually the area that I'm having trouble in. Like, my life is actually way more affected by this other thing, as they realize, as they figure themselves out.
Yes, exactly. And that's the entire journey, right? It's about just honing down our measurement little by little and getting better at it.
And one of the traps that especially those of us with autism get stuck in is people tell you, oh, you should work on this, instead of going, but I want to work on this other thing.
Honestly, interestingly, I just having this conversation this evening as well, where with a colleague of mine, where I realized that for the first time, one of my big shifts in my life that really happened with awareness was, instead of focusing on my weaknesses, focusing on my strengths. And people always think of trying to round it out to the averages, but when your mind is so geared toward a very specific perspective, I think that should be utilized as a blessing, as an advantage, right? That you have a perspective that only you share with yourself and those you decide to share it with. And that type of experience is really valuable for anyone. So I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, that's one of our philosophies at OurTism, is we focus on the individual strengths, because like, you already know what your weaknesses are, and it can be a very vulnerable subject. And so we go like, we know, like, you're not good at that, but we're going to focus on the things you're good at and find the place that you fit in that area. And if you want to work on your challenges and your weaknesses, that's up to you. We're not going to be like, you have to do this if it's something that makes you uncomfortable. Where I feel like a lot of therapies for the autism spectrum are like, oh, you're very sensory sensitive, so let's expose you to a lot of sensory, get you over that. And it's just like, well, now you've just put fear into this child about like everything, and you've lost trust, and you've just made so many more obstacles to get over. Where when I go, you know what, I want to work on this sensory area, and they're like, okay, well, let's approach it in a safe way, in a trusting way. And then when I go, you know what, I'm done right now, I'm overwhelmed, it's like, okay, now we're going to back up, we're going to do something else. Like, that's a much better way to approach it, and you'll get way more done happen if you just threw someone into something they're not ready for.
100%. It's always, and that's exactly what I was talking about earlier, is when you embrace, like, I mean, going through the process of diagnosis and treatment is its own thing, right? So it's and that
I like, in a way, I'm really grateful for my late diagnosis. I've heard such horror stories of like little 6-year-olds being told they need to do things and thrown into situations. I'm like, why would you do that?
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I didn't even, not until my 20s, did I have any idea what it was, right? But it's also like it always just kind of sneaks in. It sneaks in. It's something, because you're in your own reality. You're behind your own lens. So unless something drastically shifts very suddenly, it's very hard to pick up on things. It's like, maybe I imagine it's like slowly realizing that you need to wear corrective lenses, right? So similar idea. And it's not because you can't see. It's just the way your lens is shifting is completely unique to you, and it just needs a course correction, right? It doesn't need to be changed. It doesn't need to be improved or resolved. It's not about that. It doesn't need to be sterilized. It doesn't. It just needs to be redirected. So.
Yeah, I remember when I was little, I would like complain about back pain and after my diagnosis, it even took me a while to realize the back pain was actually part of a sensory overload. It was one of the signals that I was getting overloaded. And for a long time, people associated it with like constipation or with like I ate something or like, all these other things. And so then I would like continue to be in a situation that was overwhelming until I threw up or until I was crying. You froze. Are you still there?
I'm there.
Okay.
Did it work?
Yeah. Oh, you froze again.
Can you see me?
Yeah. Okay, you're back.
Okay. Good.
Our internet's not that greatest. Yeah, so I remember that. So like those telltale signs were just not understood, and
they're just reactions. Your mind's defending itself. Your mind is defending itself. People don't realize that.
Yeah, and like my instinct was like, oh, I have back pain. I should go. I should leave. And they're like, well, what? No. I was like, no, that's not what that means.
No, you have to. It's always the challenge of understanding yourself and allowing and asking. It's weird when you're afraid to ask the question in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the biggest first hurdles that I had to overcome as well. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. For a long time, I was taught to fight my instincts, and so now I'm learning to trust them again. Because I was really told to shut them down. And so now I'm like trying to get back more in my body and go, you know what? I really think this is what it's telling me. And listen to that.
Have you tried any forms of meditation?
Oh yeah. I've done meditation since middle school. And
so
I really enjoy it.
Tell me about your practice.
So I really like to sit and just clear my mind, because like I can have way too much going on in my head, and so I just,
of course,
and then especially like sensory wise, I like it really quiet. So like I'll go on a hike and like sit in nature, or I'll like go in my room and like turn off all the lights and like sit in a quiet space. And what I did when I was little is I had this chandelier in my room that was pink, and I hated pink. So I hung all these things from it, and I would lay on the floor and stare at like all these like colorful things and like artwork I had hung from my chandelier, and just stare at that. Oh, you bet. and I would stare at the chandelier till I calmed down. And I remember like really enjoying doing that. And my parents would come into my room and just see me laying on the floor, like, "What are you doing?" And I think I was trying to meditate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like a chant, right? Anything that's hypnotic, like could be like an
Yeah.
om,
Yeah.
or like some sort of like bell or moving mechanism. Those are all hypnotic in their own way, right? And they can put you in a space where you're no longer exuding energy
Yeah.
consciously.
I definitely one of my unconscious verbal stims is to hum or to do like la. And so when I'm concentrating something, I'm doing that, and it's definitely a way of like blocking out noise or blocking out things that are distracting me. But I don't even realize I'm doing it. And so when for my twin sister used to dance to me doing that, and I'd look at her, I'm like, "What? There's no music. Why are you dancing?" And she didn't tell me. She just went, "Oh, I just wanted to dance," and she'd walk away. And then I started being more in tune with my body, and I realized I was doing that. And I was taking this painting class in college, and one of my friends are like, "Why do you always hum in painting class?" And I was like, "Do I do that? I didn't even realize I did that." And then I started paying attention, and in that class, whenever I was
Thank you for
concentrating
telling me.
really hard, I started singing, and like everyone heard it, and I had no idea. And then I asked Lily, and I was like, "Lily, have you ever heard me do this?" She's like, "Oh, you do it all the time, and I even dance to it." I was like, "That's why you just randomly start dancing?"
That's why you're dancing.
She's like, "Yeah, you didn't know that?" Oh, I thought you were joking that you didn't know why I was dancing.
Yeah, I definitely like, so when I think this, if I'm ever messaging someone and I'm doing emojis, I always make the face of the emoji at my screen as I'm typing it. So if I send you like an emoji sticking my tongue out, it's because I'm actually stuck my tongue out at the screen as I was typing it. Or like if I'm winking, I'm actually winking at my iPhone. So it's like it's something that I greatly I appreciate that. So
Yeah. I only send like lol or ha 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 when I actually have laughed. So I laugh and I
absolutely.
send that. And like I know other people just send it because they thought you were trying to make a joke.
No.
And I'm like,
No.
so I was like, people would be laughing at weird stuff. I'm like, did you really laugh at that? Like, no, that's just what you're supposed to type. I'm like, what?
Oh. Is that what you did? Are you telling me communicating what you did, right? That's
No, like if we were face to face, would you have laughed? Would I have seen you laughing? Oh no. Then why did you say
why
that?
you do it? I totally subscribe to that, 100%. Thank you. I'm really glad that everyone now knows that. They should subscribe. You know, like be consistent.
Yeah.
Stick by your guns. So. This is a movement. We're starting a movement here. I feel it happening.
I know for a while, instead of like sending emojis or GIFs, me and my friends would just take a picture of our face and send it.
Oh, I do that all the time. You have to.
It was like, yeah, I remember doing that, and it would just like, and then we would start laughing at each other's faces. So it would just be like a whole bunch of faces, and like people like, if anyone saw those tags, they'd just be like, "Why are you sending selfies back and forth?"
Why I love a good selfie. I think we have a selfie. I think we definitely have a selfie.
Yeah.
I almost guarantee it. I totally agree. No, actually, we definitely have a selfie. I'm gonna so.
Hey, Alex, are we getting any questions? Because I'm not seeing any. There's nothing. we have no comments. So guys, we'll answer your questions if you leave them. I guess you guys are so intensely listening that you forgot to type.
Yeah, if anyone needs to get in touch with me, like obviously they can always ask you, or you can directly in touch with me. I'll have my my contact information presented with you later, so you can get to the site.
So I want to talk about your art.
Please.
I use art very therapeutically. where like it was a very stress relieving activity. And I know like different people use it different ways. So what do you experience when you paint?
I experience silence. That's what I experience. That's the joy that art brings me, ultimately.
Because like I haven't painted in a while, but I use a lot. I do a lot of writing. I do like script writing and a lot of things. And so like when I experience an intense emotion, I put it into my story, and I found that I've learned a lot about myself through writing and even writing about different characters in fictional stories. I put a lot of myself into it. Do you find that you put a lot of yourself into your artwork?
Absolutely. I mean, when the only way it's possible for me to do what I do is because of how I remember things. And it's all about taking some sort of memory, physical phenomenon, or vibration. It could be like a guitar chord being played, or memory of like the birth of a child, or a wedding, or maybe even a sunset, right? And then distill that into a single point of space and time, and explode it as layers of paint on canvas, as a real world artifact on canvas. And being able to take memory and stretch it out, flatten it, and then press it back together is the root of my process.
That sounds so cool. The way you would explain it. Like, I'm a very visual thinker, and so I just like saw like this explosion of paint onto paper, and like it was really beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very kind. So, no, it's they're great. If anyone is interested, it's you can go Instagram or .com. Just find Nima Abstract, Nima Abstract. I'm very easy to find. So.
Yeah, and then I dress very colorfully. Well, one color. I wear a lot of yellow. And when I met you, you were very, very colorful.
You have to. You have to.
And I find that that's a rarity, that people dress very boldly with color. Are you froze again?
I mean, I think you're back. I think that's the direction the world is going. I think it's important for people to see and embrace a sense of self-individuality that speaks to them, because that's half of your ability to communicate, is being in your own element, right? Because that's also something that people are absorbing from you while you're communicating, and that's also part of the response pattern and creating your space and creating space for others as well. So.
Yeah. And I really like that you sell your creative pieces, colorful pieces as suits, because like I feel like we've lost like color in more elegant fashion and more, where especially with guys, they wear like a lot of black, a lot of like these plain colors. Sure. And like, so I'm really excited that you have like brought color to that. That's so is there a message you have with that you wanted to bring, or was it just like, I want to wear this, so I'm making it?
No, it's about embracing every part of what is possible. Right. There shouldn't be any filter on what you can sense or how you can communicate what you're sensing. And a lot of my work, it involves, in order to get the full textural landscape of what's possible, you can't leave anything out, especially something as fundamental as a color. So it's about taking the opportunity to fulfill every part of the message that you're trying to communicate. And that's my when people ask me, Nima, because I let them know take a baby, because a lot of your friends are having kids now. You put it in front of the painting, and the baby doesn't move for like 2 minutes. The painting is done. Something about babies. They just know when they see something, they're mesmerized by it. Like they see truth. And that's my other test. It's actually my favorite test.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's true. So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I've definitely can see that where like kids have um, this magical ability to like not judge as harshly and like are very truthful and so honest. Where like nothing they say is meant to be mean, and it's just like it's really beautiful. Like I know a lot of kids are drawn to the Asperger community, where my I've known a lot of those in my community who have a lot of trouble socializing, but they can hang out with a kid all day, and the kid just loves being around them because they love the honesty of someone with Asperger's and how truthful that person is, and how they like treat the kid as an equal no matter what their age is. And so like my sister really wanted to be a teacher for a while and like be around kids, and um, so I find that so interesting that these kids won't judge these kind of people who are judged so often by society, that they're drawn to them.
And you're 100% right. It's always, you see that in many cases, right? Where the person who gratitude comes with opportunity and fortune. And I think it's as simple as people enjoy being around other grateful people. And I think gratitude is something we can all cultivate. And in any context, every situation gets better when you add gratitude to it. Either you bring people in who provide gratitude, or you, as you should always, provide some yourself. And I think it comes down to something that simple. So, I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that I think we're born like with this like kindness and understanding that we lose, and I don't know why it's taken away, but yeah, like I don't remember kids like in elementary school. I don't remember having like such a hard time as I did as we started growing up, like trying to make friends and fitting in and all that judgment. It's like I remember when I dyed my hair yellow, the people got that gave me the biggest judgment were like people in like the middle age, were like young kids, and like much old like seniors loved it. Like they would smile at me, and like, but it was like people like in the middle age area would like give me dirty looks and be like, "You're seeking attention," and, like weird things to me. Like I don't know you, but like kids would
No,
be like, "Oh, look at that! It's so magical."
it's no judgment. That's the best part. It's no judgment.
Or they just come up and like be like, "Well, why did you do that? Why is your hair yellow?" But they wanted
Why
to
not?
know. Like they were like genuinely asking, like, "Did it just happen one day?" Like,
Are you okay?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually quite awesome. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Questions here? I'm not sure how your questions come in, but I
I'm not
appreciate it.
any questions. Yeah,
Not worried at all.
sometimes we get a lot of interaction, and other times we
No
don't
worries.
so
People can
much.
tweet at me. People message me. Very easy to find. So
Yeah. So, and even if you guys are watching this later, I'll leave his contact info, and you can reach
of
out.
course, please. So.
Yeah. So let's see. else can we talk about? What was so
Yeah, I got a few more minutes.
So you weren't born with this diagnosis? You happened? Was there like something that triggered that?
So that's the interesting thing. They don't know what causes it. However, everyone does have some sort of different trigger, a marker. It could be like a death in the family, or maybe the first day of school. And mine happens to be the day I met my first girlfriend. So it's just every day since then I remember. And yeah, it's goofy. But
So, was there like a realization that something was different right when it happened, or?
I didn't notice till years later, honestly. It was because you kind of like find that starting point where all the memories start.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I keep freezing.
Can you hear you
Back.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know there's a couple things that you get that aren't from some, but it's normally like what I understand about like um, uh, a lot of them happen like at a really early age. Like DID is like a lot of trauma you can get. That's the
Mm-hmm.
split personality, um, and like there's a lot of stuff like that you can, but it happens. It has to happen really early in life. So it's interesting that it happened later. Um,
It's fascinating learning later is actually in a lot of ways I felt a blessing
mm-hmm.
because I got to a lot of my formative emotional time relative to the peak in the Midwest, farm country, Michigan. It's beautiful. And it's a really wonderful place to grow up as well. So I fully embraced it. So it's it had a really positive, profound effect. Actually, one of the funniest realizations I had was that the cool thing is with Grand Haven, Michigan, it's right in Lake Michigan. It's right near Chicago, except we're on the other side of the time zone, which means that like when I listened to friends, I didn't notice this till only actually very recently. When I was hearing stories from my friends, I realized that since we're on the edge of the time zone, the sun sets almost an hour later than it does on the East. One extra hour of daylight to play in than everyone else I know now, which is a huge blessing, right? And that's another thing I really am grateful for is that, if you count after school time, I'd have had 20% more daylight than my, maybe even more than my, the sun doesn't even set till 10 p.m. in the summer. It's crazy and beautiful. And I'm really grateful to have had that foundation in that sense. So, mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely loved summer so much when I was little, and like my mom would get freaked out if it was dark out. Like she's still to this day, it's like I guess only criminals come out at night, like when it's dark, and like because she's like, oh, don't walk alone in the dark, and like we were always in such a safe neighborhood, so like yeah. So it was very nice that summer days were longer for that reason. But
totally
for me, I've always been kind of a night owl where I like the night because it's not as sensory overloading and quieter. There's not as many people, and so I liked it for that reason. But I didn't like the cold, and it always got colder when the sun was gone, and so I have visited a few places where it stays warm at night, and I'm like, oh, I want to live there. where it's nice and warm at night. That'd be nice to like I always
It's a
thought
dream.
night swimming was super cool.
Well, especially only in the
Yeah.
summer. That one's cold.
Yeah.
The problem is, what's also worse when like the air is, like sometimes the water can be warm in the air, so you don't want to get out. And or anyway, it's just like it's always a thing. I grew up in the lake, right? So that was my entire childhood. It's the best. So I'm very grateful. And that's it. Now I'm actually I'm coming to you from the great city of New York, and just really the nice thing about New York is it's in a way like for those who might be overwhelmed sensory wise, it's a lot, like, obviously, but the most important thing is learning how to filter yourself in your environment and realizing that everything is actually very stable and has something to contribute and something that we can, each and everyone can learn from. So
yeah,
that's
I went to college near New York for a semester, and I just never wanted to go into the city because like that was so tiring. And I would be done. Like I'm like, okay, I'm here for 2 hours. Now I need to go home and sleep for a day.
Yeah, I'll take a lot out of you, physically, spiritually, emotionally, all the above.
Yeah. So where I would like to live would be like in like a forest in the middle of nowhere. Like that's like for me. But like that freaks my mom out. She needs to be in it or near a big city. So maybe one day I'll do it.
Keep me posted. I enjoy it. There's always a retreat is always a good idea. Nice place like that. So.
I love camping. I go camping a lot during the summer and like go to these quiet places. Like I love doing that. And nature is so calming. I feel like it's really helpful for like mental illness and even physical illness. Like it's just like so peaceful. Like I just can't help but feel at peace in nature. We have these fire trails that go by the cliffs near us that have all these wildflowers. It's so pretty, and I go walking there whenever I'm stressed. It's so nice.
No, it's beauty and equilibrium, right? Yeah. That's the blessing. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, still no comment.
No worries. There's no rush. We're coming up on the end of the hour anyway. So
yeah, we got 10 more minutes. So you guys, it's your last chance to ask a question.
You can find me anytime. So no worries about that. Thank you. No, honestly, thank you for having me on here.
Thank you for coming.
No, absolutely. It's really a pleasure. And I'm really excited about everything that you're doing, all the amazing work that's coming up through OurTism, and how you're creating hope and for those who have been looking, and education for those who have been wanting. So that's really important because it's a conversation to us and create language that really, really important and really the work that you're doing. So appreciate
it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about all the things I'm able to do. Like, I never thought that this is what I would do. Like, I couldn't imagine it when I was younger. I didn't even think I would graduate high school. And here I am speaking to people about how to help their children and how to like succeed with autism. I still don't know how to word that because I don't want to say like that I overcame autism. It's like I'm just living with it and like using the strengths, because a lot of people, they take that diagnosis and they go, oh yeah, all the bad traits about it is autism, and then they say like they overcame it with all the good things. I'm like, no, but autism affects both areas. Like, yeah, it's giving me crappy days, but it's also giving me my best days, and
Yeah, it's not an obstacle. It's like
no,
just a different way of. It's just a different.
um,
It's a different path.
yeah,
Right. It's
and
not
so
a. It's like anything in life. Right?
yeah, and so I've learned how to create more good days than bad days, and focus on the good days, instead of the bad days, and that kind of stuff. And that's really a lot of the things to me that
What's your
I'm
secret? What's your secret? What's your trick to filtering?
filtering.
Like how do you discern between the two?
I don't. I just feel like the more you practice positivity, the easier it is. And doing things that inspire you and make you happy, like doing what works instead of what you should be doing. We're like listening to your body. So like if I just like am in the mood to listen to a song, that's what I'm gonna do. If I'm in the mood to eat, then I make sure I listen to my body and go, you know what, I'm hungry right now, I gotta get some food, instead of like continuing with whatever I'm supposed to be doing. I
Should is a dangerous word.
Yeah.
Should is a very dangerous word.
Like, oh, I'm supposed to go to class right now, but I mentally and physically can't. Like, I know it's unhealthy. So I listen to that, and I think that we need to change society to say it's okay to take a mental health day. It's okay to, step out of the room for 5 minutes to calm down and get a breath of fresh air.
There should be covered by insurance. I think it should be a medical right. It's not a luxury. Your mental health is not a luxury. It's a right. It's part of your health.
Yeah.
It is in the public interest of America, of the world, to have a public health system that supports people's mental health, because that's where your productivity comes from or lacks from. So
I found like a lot of those bad days happen because I haven't checked in with my body enough, and I haven't listened to it.
Hydrating is a huge thing. I've relearned. It's amazing. Just chug like maybe a pint of water in the morning, maybe a full liter. Just like fuel yourself. People always underhydrate. It's an extraordinary. It'll make your day. Yeah. I promise. Try it for a week. It's extraordinary. So, and, I was gonna ask, but if you have any, I know my questions always take a second. So, if you have any last questions, thoughts, the last few minutes.
I guess like.
Do we get any answers? Do we get any questions in here?
We have someone who says, who said a few things.
Man, thank you so much.
So is there any message that you want to tell everybody before we sign
up? Thank you for having me, and in the spirit of gratitude, thank you all for joining.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Please come back next week. I do these talks every week, Wednesday at 7 Pacific Standard Time for about an hour. Check out the website, OurTism.com. I have my blog up there where I write about living on the spectrum. I have my workshop coming up in Florida, which you can sign up for if you go to the calendar. And come to the support group tomorrow, RSVP for that. We have a great group that's happening. So come to that. And this week I had Nima on. Thank you for coming on. I have his website linked in the description to check him out if you want more information about all the cool stuff we talked about, and follow him for the stuff he'll do in the future.
I appreciate the support.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
He has a great TED Talk on there. Go check that out if you want to listen to more of him. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay colorful. Bye-bye.